If you've been thinking about selling on Whatnot, you've probably seen those sellers with huge rooms starting everything at $1 starting bid. And somehow, almost like magic, every item turns into a bidding war. They started at $1, the room goes absolutely feral, and sometimes the item sells for literally more than you could buy the item for at full price on their website. So naturally, you might think, okay, obviously that's the strategy. I just need to start everything at $1 and let the room do the rest. Wrong-o! The problem is, those sellers aren't winning because they're starting everything at $1. They're winning because they already built the room that can support a $1 start. And if you're a brand new seller with 5 people in your room, you do not have a let the room do the rest kind of room yet. And as we know from this video I posted a while ago, if you sell something for $1 on Whatnot, you are not making money. You are going backwards. So in this video, we're going to talk about what your starting bid should actually be. Not based on what big sellers are doing, not based on what you hope people will bid it up to, but based on your inventory cost, your fees, and the kind of room you've actually built. This is actually episode 3 in my series on things I've learned since I started selling on Whatnot last year. And if there's one thing I've been trying to drill into your head this entire series, it's this. A successful Whatnot show has way more to do with the room that you've built than the starting bid that you choose. So if your strategy is to lose a bunch of money and hope that it magically turns into a business later, then respectfully, this video is probably gonna hurt your feelings. But if you want to start selling on Whatnot without going broke, this is your sign to listen up. Let's get into it. The main thing you need to understand about starting bids is this. You will never beat anyone else on this app on price. Because with $1 being the lowest possible starting bid, we've already hit rock bottom. And unfortunately, there are always going to be sellers on this app that are willing to lose money whether they know they are losing money or not. Think of it like opening a lemonade stand in your neighborhood. You do the math and you realize that after lemons, sugar, cups, signs, and everything else it takes to run the stand, you need to sell your lemonade for $5 a cup to actually make a healthy profit. Then your neighbor opens a lemonade stand next door and decides to sell theirs for $1 per cup. Your first instinct might be, well, I guess I'm gonna have to sell my lemonade for $1 a cup too, if I want anyone to buy from me. But once you do that, you're not building a better business. You are just lowering the standard for what you're willing to accept. Now, Whatnot is basically a suburban neighborhood full of $1 lemonade stands. But let's rewind the story. Before you opened your lemonade stand, imagine you actually spent time getting to know your neighbors. You showed up to community events, you talked to people, you supported them, you built relationships. So when you finally open your lemonade stand, yes, your lemonade is $5 and your next door neighbor's is $1, but your stand is brighter. It's more fun. You have different flavors. People are hanging out. You have games, little raffles, maybe a giveaway. People are not just buying your lemonade. They are coming to your stand because they like being there. That is the difference. The $1 lemonade stand is competing on price. You are competing on experience, trust, and community. And yes, I'm going to reference episode 1 of this series in every episode of this series until this series ends, because it is the most important one, and that is why I did it first. Anyways, that is why this conversation on starting bids matters, because if you have not built the room yet, your starting bid cannot be based on the bidding war you hope will happen. It has to be based on the profit you are willing to accept if nobody else bids. Community gives you room to grow, and then profit gives you room to keep going. So now that we understand why price alone will not save you, we need to talk about the minimum amount of profit that actually makes selling on Whatnot worth it. The truth is, you are running a business here. So unless you want to be one of those $1 lemonade stand people who's actively losing money every single day, you need to stop and do some quick math. And that math heavily involves what you're spending on inventory and what you're spending on shipping materials. For example, let's say you spend $5 on an item and sell it for $8. On paper, that kind of feels like you just made $3, but you didn't. After Whatnot fees, you're left with about $6.83. And then if you subtract the $5 you paid for the item, You're now left with about $1.83. Then you still have to account for shipping materials. We'll just say 50 cents in this example just to keep it simple. Now you're left with $1.33 in profit. Now, here's where the math comes in. If you want to know what your actual net profit margin is, the formula is simple. You're going to take that net profit, that $1.33, and you're going to divide it by the sale price, which is $8. So that gives you about a 16.6% net profit margin. And listen, if you compare that to huge retailers, 16% actually sounds fantastic. A lot of big retailers operate on very thin margins. No joke, like 5% or less. But they have scale. You don't. They have thousands or millions of transactions. You are one person with a limited amount of inventory, limited time, limited energy, and probably a pile of poly mailers somewhere that you keep telling yourself is organized. So this is just my opinion, but selling on Whatnot is not worth it unless you are making at least a 30% net profit margin on average, and ideally aiming for 50% or higher when you can. Any lower than that and you might not be running a business. You might have just invented a really complicated way to stay busy. If your margins are too thin, every mistake hurts. Every giveaway hurts. Every slow show hurts. Every damaged item, every return, every bad buy, every slow moving piece of inventory. It all eats into profit you barely had in the first place. Now, why am I saying 30%? Because I know somebody is going to say, well, I'm happy with making less than that. And that is completely fine if your goals are different than mine. If you are selling on Whatnot for fun, or you're trying to liquidate some inventory, or if this is just a hobby for you, or if you're intentionally taking lower margins for a very specific reason, then your number might be different. But if you are trying to build actual long-term income from this, I personally think 30% net margin should be the floor. Not the dream, not the goal forever, the floor. Because once your margins get much lower than that, as I said, there is very little room for anything to go wrong. And things will go wrong. You will buy bad inventory. You will accidentally run too many giveaways. You will have slow shows. You will have items that sit forever. You will spend money on packaging. You will spend hours sourcing, preparing, photographing, organizing, running the show, packing orders, and doing customer service. And even though it is hard to put an exact dollar amount on every single minute of your time is part of the business. So for me, 30% is the lowest profit margin where this still feels worth it while I'm building. I would love for that number to be higher, and I'm actively trying to build towards a higher profit margin. But 30% gives me enough room to keep going, to reinvest, and not feel like I'm working just to break even. And honestly, if you're okay with making less than that, I would just ask yourself one question. Are you okay with that number because it genuinely supports your goals? Or are you okay with it because you're afraid that people will not buy from you if you charge what you actually need to charge? Now, before we get into what your exact starting bid should actually be, there is something else that matters even more. Sometimes the starting bid is not the problem. Sometimes the problem is your cost of goods. Because if you paid too much for the item in the first place, there may not be a starting bid that magically makes the numbers work. You can start it low and lose money. You could start it high and risk nobody buying it. But either way, the problem started before the auction ever did. And I think this is where a lot of sellers get stuck. They buy inventory because it looks valuable, or because the retail price is high, or because it feels like a good deal compared to what the item actually sells for. But the retail value doesn't matter if your profit margin is terrible. Just because something sells for a higher dollar amount does not automatically mean you made money. A $60 sale with a buy bad cost can make you less money than a $10 sale with a good buy cost. That is why smart sourcing matters so much. Your starting bid is not just going to come from what the item is worth. It comes from what you paid, what it costs you to sell it, and what profit you need to make for that sale to actually be worth your time. So before you ask, what should I start this at? Ask yourself, did I buy this item at a price that gives me room to profit? So now let me show you what I mean. Because once you know what you've paid for the item, you can work backwards into what the item actually needs to sell for. So now let's actually calculate what you need to charge. Not what sounds cheap, not what feels competitive, not what you hope people will bid it up to, what you actually need to charge, what you actually need your starting bid to be. Because this is where people get stuck. They understand that they need to make money, but when they go live, they hold up the item and then they panic and pick a number based on vibes. And listen, I love vibes, but vibes are not a pricing strategy. Your starting bid needs to come from your numbers. So the easiest way to think about it is this. Your starting bid should cover your cost of goods, your whatnot fees, your shipping materials, and the minimum net profit margin that makes the sale worth it for you. As I mentioned, for me, that net profit margin is 30%. Yours might be different, but you need to know what that is before you start the auction. So let's stop talking in hypotheticals and look at what this actually means. I made a chart that shows, based on what you paid for the item, what that item would need to sell to hit a 30%, a 40%, and a 50% net profit margin after basic whatnot fees. And just so you guys are aware, this chart is available for a free download in my link in my description, and I'm also going to put it in the comments as well. Now, please keep in mind, this does not include shipping materials, giveaway costs, or anything extra that you personally spend to run your show, because that number is going to be different for everyone. So if anything, this chart is a starting point, not the final answer. Here's how to read this. If you paid $5 for an item and you want to make a 30% net profit margin, that item needs to sell for around $9 before you even factor in your packaging and your other stuff. If you want a 40% profit margin, it needs to sell for around $11. And if you want a 50% margin, it needs to sell for around $14. So if you paid $5 for something and you are starting it at $5, $6, or $7 because you're hoping people will bid it up, you're not pricing based on profit, you are pricing based on hope. Now, before somebody comes running to the comments, I want to be very, very clear. I am not saying that low starts never work. There are absolutely categories, sellers, and situations where low starts make sense. If you are selling in a category with massive demand, fast-moving inventory, repeat buyers, collectors, or items where people instantly know the value as soon as you hold the item up, lower starts can work. Trading cards are a good example right now, especially Pokemon cards. Certain collectibles are a good example. If you have a huge room and a strong buyer base and enough demand that you can confidently trust the room to bid the item up, that is a completely different situation. But that is not the same thing as a brand new seller with 5 people in their room, starting everything low and hoping that the algorithm somehow leads them to a bidding war. And I know that some of you believe that you should start low, take the hit, and just treat it like the cost of building your business. I understand the logic, but I just don't agree with it as blanket advice for new resellers. Because taking a strategic loss is one thing, but accidentally building a business model around losing money is another. If you have a specific plan, a budget for those losses, inventory you can afford to move cheaply, and a clear reason you're doing it, that is strategy. But if you are starting low because you're afraid that nobody's gonna buy from you otherwise, that is not a strategy. That's just fear-based pricing. So if a low start works for you, genuinely, that is great. Another argument that I see a lot is, well, low starts are worth it in the beginning because you need to make those 1,000 sales. And listen, I understand why people care about that milestone. On Whatnot, your first 1K sales qualifies you for early payout, amongst a couple of other things, like your seller status. And at that point, you don't have to wait for your orders to be delivered in order for your earnings to become available. That is a big deal. And I also think that celebrating your first 1,000 sales is amazing. That is a huge milestone, and it can be a huge community building moment. I've attended lots of 1,000 sales celebration shows since I started on Whatnot. But I do not think that it is worth training your first 1,000 buyers to expect you to sell at prices that don't actually support your business. Because the audience you build in the beginning is the audience you're teaching. And I want to say this carefully because I know that cash flow is a real issue for some sellers. But getting paid faster does not make an unprofitable sale profitable. If you are willing to take a loss on 1,000 orders just to get access to the money a few days earlier, that is not a growth strategy. That is a cash flow problem disguised as a strategy. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I am saying that because I know that Whatnot can feel very, very exciting when money is moving quickly. But moving money is not the same thing as making money. If you're selling inventory at a loss just to hit a milestone, you are not building stability, you're building pressure. So yes, low starts might help you move faster toward a milestone, but at what cost? Because again, if you hit 1,000 sales and you trained your buyers to only show up for unsustainable prices, you may have unlocked faster payouts, but you also built a business model that's going to be really hard to climb out of. So my opinion is this: do not sacrifice your margins just to hit a milestone faster. Build the community, celebrate the milestone when it comes, but protect your profit while you're getting there. So anyways, next time you are getting ready for a show and you're trying to decide what your starting bid should be, I want you to stop asking what number will get people to bid and start asking what number protects my business if only one person bids. You are not trying to be the cheapest lemonade stand in the neighborhood. You are trying to build the stand that people actually want to come back to. And if you can do that, if you can build trust, price intentionally, source with margin in mind, and stop apologizing for needing to make money, that is when your starting bid starts working for you instead of working against you. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned for the next video in this series where I am going to be painstakingly breaking down what you need to do to set up the shipping before your whatnot shows so that you don't end up screwed when it's time to pack orders and you for some reason owe whatnot a lot of money. Also, subscribe if you don't want to miss that. And 2 links in my description. Don't forget, the first one is that chart. It is a free PDF download. It took me 2 seconds to make, so it's free. And I just think it's helpful. I have mine printed off and put on my bulletin board just so I can remember easily what my starting bid should be for certain stuff. And the second one is a link if you want to sign up to be a seller on Whatnot. This is not sponsored. Every Whatnot seller gets this link and I'd highly recommend using it because you get commission when somebody signs up under your link and makes their first sale. And the seller who signs up under your link, if you guys want to sign up under my link, you get $150 match your first week of selling on Whatnot. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Just kidding, I'm back. Did you guys know that I have a merch line? I do. It's not about me though. It is just a line for live sellers and resellers alike. I come out with a new design drop every month and none of it says Taylor Joe Flips on it because that would be silly. And I have one that's coming out this month that has not dropped yet because I'm still waiting for my sample. But if you guys want to check that out, that link is in my link tree, which is always in my description. And that link tree also will bring you to my Instagram, which is where I post real life stuff on my stories like all the time. So if you guys want the deets on anything that is happening in the life of Taylor Joe, just go ahead and follow me on the gram. Okay, love you, bye.